Welcome to Work Planning Process Descriptions, and thank you for your interest. We hope you'll take time after this short presentation to explore the other Triad Unlimited presentations on YouTube, follow us on LinkedIn, and visit our website to see all our services and training offerings. Here you can see the definition of work planning. Using the information provided during work identification, the next stop is work planning. Not all work needs to be planned, but that decision has to be aligned with some criteria around work priority, job complexity, and potential resource consumption. Proactive tasks, such as PM and predictive maintenance, are not usually planned beyond ensuring the parts necessary are available. The four processes that we're going to talk about in work planning are routine work planning, emergent or emergency work planning, outage work planning, and contractor work planning. The idea is to get the work wrench ready in order to cut back on the time spent by technicians hunting parts and materials, preparing documentation, and other non-executing activities. Let's take a look at the benefits of work planning. When we prepare routine work and get it wrench ready, we increase the effective wrench time. Emergency work planning serves to protect personnel and equipment and the environment and perhaps the whole business. Outage planning and work grouping optimizes production uptime. Planning contracted work ensures contracted work scope, content, and quality is acceptable to the business. The idea is to prepare all work for execution by identifying the necessary resources, the priority of the work, the operational status, and using that information as an input into work scheduling. Our first process in work planning is routine work planning. The first point of contact for an incoming work request is usually the maintenance planner. Ideally, this person has an extensive knowledge of process, maintenance, storeroom operations, and strong relationships in the workplace. These traits are optimal because what the planner does sets up the executing technician for success or failure. The planner must review the problem and visualize repair requirements based on experience, interview with the requester, and walkdowns. If planning is being done as a new process or using less experienced personnel, it's a good idea to use a planning checklist and walk down the work area to ensure consideration of location, interferences, and support such as scaffolding or insulation removal. Lockout, tagout needs to be thought about. Any permits that are necessary to do the work, any special tools and things like that need to be considered, and the checklist is a big help to less experienced people. It's typical for a work request to appear faster than they get evaluated and planned. This creates a backlog of unplanned work orders. Backlog management is key to success or failure of the planning function. The key to backlog management is proper work identification and prioritization, including rules around which types of work require planning. If these processes are performed correctly, the backlog can be considered accurate, and the scope of the planning function can then be correctly sized. Think of planning as air traffic control and the work orders as aircraft. If you don't have enough controllers, you've got a big problem. If the backlog isn't managed during work identification, a work request backlog can quickly grow into an unmanageable pile of unknown criticality, which destroys morale and the effectiveness of the planning function. To give you some sense of scale, I've been around organizations that have backlogs as large as 10,000 work orders. In my opinion, a non-prioritized, unorganized, non-outage backlog that big should just be deleted in favor of seeing what will happen. Planning routine work is the most important function in the work management system. Emergency work is another process directly affected by the work identification process. Assuming work identification is performed correctly, work classified as emergency or emergent does not unnecessarily disrupt the work management system. An emergency work coordination plan should be developed so points of contact are known in various areas and for each system or process. The duties of each point of contact during emergency work preparation must be clearly defined. As soon as work is classified as an emergency, the emergency plan should kick in, and there should be no confusion about who to inform, how to access resources including parts and materials, and what to do in terms of the larger safety and environmental concerns, perhaps in tandem with outside emergency services. The maintenance planner often serves as the initial coordinator during notification of an emergency, and then transitions to executing a support role to bring the necessary parts, materials, and special support to bear. When emergency work is executed, it doesn't mean all rules around recording work is performed and parts used and labor expended go out the door. Minimum closeout documentation requirements must be established and enforced, regardless of work classification. Outage meetings are necessarily cross-functional, typically involving planning, scheduling, operations or production, and sometimes engineering, if a shutdown is related to a modification or a new installation project. Outage meetings must follow an agenda. They must honor time management and enforce action items. There can be millions of dollars at stake during an outage, so there are much better places to not be serious than a full-blown outage planning meeting. All of these things must be documented and proceduralized so anyone in the outage can quickly understand the roles, responsibilities, desired behaviors, and intended outcomes of the meetings. Some considerations are: the most important outcome is a mutually agreeable understanding of shutdown scope and timing. Communication protocols between everyone when issues come up must be established. The meeting should include formal post-shutdown review to see how well planning and scheduling reflect reality of execution. The idea here isn't persecution, but continuous improvement. Safety first, hopefully, isn't a phrase we just parrot as we take shortcuts or use unsafe techniques. Not to generalize, but unless contractor safety practices are reviewed for compliance with house requirements, they might not be. All work performed must comply with house safety and environmental standards and requirements, no exceptions whatsoever. Safety program compliance should be a condition for approved vendor status. The contractor is responsible for compliance with house rules. Contractor training should be conducted for all new personnel and periodically thereafter. Complete transparency regarding work performed and review of completed work should be a condition of contractor approval and work acceptance. To summarize, work planning requires us to prepare routine work for execution, coordinate support for emergency work, create shutdown work scope, and integrate site safety and environmental requirements into contracted work performance. This concludes the work planning process descriptions presentation. Thank you for participating.